We are in the kitchen with Julia Child today, cooking from her French chef cookbook, the cookbook that she made based on her wildly popular television show from the 1960s. We're cooking what is actually classically known as an Italian dish, but rumor has it that Julia Child makes a delicious version of ossobuco. This comes from her 122nd show, and about the dish, Julia says, "Ossobuco sounds like an exotic dish, but it is actually just a particularly succulent brown veal stew of Italian origin. What makes it unusual is that it is made of veal shanks, and its pungent brown sauce is deliciously flavored with orange and lemon peel. Like all stews, you can get the cooking done way in advance, and it is easy on your budget." I don't often disagree with Julia Child, but I have to disagree with her on this last point. This is not a dish that is easy on your budget. Veal shanks are expensive. So today I'm gonna take the challenge to cook two different types of ossobuco, one with the more expensive veal shanks and the other with the significantly less expensive beef shanks. These are the two cuts of meat that I'm using today. And just to give you a point of reference, I live in Seattle, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest of the US. And while we're not known for our inexpensive cost of living, I'm assuming that you'll find something similar in grocery stores, at least around the US. So the veal in front of me was almost 3 times as expensive as the beef. $19.99 a pound versus $6.99 a pound. And Julia calls for 6 to 8 pounds of veal shanks. So I have about 2.5 pounds of veal shanks here, which is 2 veal shanks. That was almost $50. That to me is not an inexpensive meal. On the other hand, these beef shanks were about $7 a pound. I got 3 pounds and spent less than half as much as I spent on the veal. So I'm preparing 2 versions of ossobuco today. I'm gonna prepare them the exact same way, just using this different cut of meat, and give you a verdict at the end of my cooking day today, whether or not beef shanks are a good enough substitute to make this a truly budget-friendly meal. The method to Julia's ossobuco, which is veal shanks braised with wine and herbs and flavored with lemon and orange, is not dissimilar to many other stews that Julia and other chefs have, and the method is actually pretty easy. Generally, we're gonna brown the meat, prepare the braising liquid, braise the meat, finish the sauce, and then serve. I'm gonna make it easy on myself though and get all of the other ingredients ready before I move us over to the stove. So let's get going on Julia Child's ossobuco. Okay, first we're gonna chop the onions and carrots, and Julia calls for 1/2 cup each of sliced carrots and onions. I've got 2 bowls. I'm just gonna split my ingredients between these 2 bowls. I also have 2 casserole dishes ready over on my stove. Onions all chopped up. Okay, these 2 off to the side. Next step is the tomatoes. Julia calls for 2 to 3 firm red ripe tomatoes and says, drop the tomatoes for 10 seconds in boiling water, cut out the stems and peel, cut tomatoes in half crosswise, squeeze out the juice and seeds, and chop the pulp roughly. Half and half here. 1 for our beef, 1 for our veal. Next comes the citrus. So for the citrus, she calls for 1 orange and 1 lemon. These are teeny tiny little lemons, so I might use 1.5 or 2 each. And says, cut the colored part of the peel off the orange and lemon, then cut the peel into very fine julienne strips. And to remove the bitterness, simmer for 10 minutes in water, drain. Okay, veal, check. Carrots, onions, check. Tomatoes, check. Orange, lemon. Now we need basil and garlic. A teaspoon of basil and 1 to 2 garlic cloves crushed. Big one and a small one in each bowl. Garlic is done. Pretty typical of Miss Julia to add some booze to her dishes. She calls for white wine or dry white vermouth. So that's what I'm using. A cup of white wine or 3/4 of a cup dry white vermouth. So I need 1.5 cups total of this. We're almost ready to move over to the stove. I've got all the braising ingredients done and moved over. I've got all the browning ingredients done almost. I'm just gonna now bread our veal and beef shanks and move the beef stock that I have over to the stove. So this is 4 cups of just regular beef stock. Julia's recipe calls for veal stock, but not only could I not find veal bones, I also couldn't find the stock in any of my local specialty markets. So I'm just using a really flavorful homemade beef stock and hope that that's good enough. So this is gonna go over to the stove, and then I'm going to bread our veal shanks. So Julia says, lay the meat on a tray or a large sheet of wax paper, salt and pepper all sides, dredge in flour, and shake off excess. My helper's sleeping on the job. Okay, they're dredged and everything is moved over to the stove, so it's finally time for us to get cooking. Okay, here I am set up over at the stove. So I have ingredients and my beef on the left side, more ingredients and my veal on the right side, plus my cookbook. And since I'm doing 2 full separate ossobucos today, I'm going to have to time it pretty carefully. Generally, the step is to brown the meat, and then while the meat is browning, Stir in the carrots and onions, cover and cook over moderate heat for 5 to 6 minutes. So I think I'm gonna get the first shift of meat browning and then get both of our vegetables started in these casserole dishes that I have. Okay, these guys are brown to my liking. So right in our carrots and onions they go. Let's get the beef in. Beef goes right in their resting place. Okay, now I need to pour a little bit of this oil off and then I'm gonna deglaze the pan. Okay, oil poured off. Wine goes in. Okay, nicely deglazed. Now I'm gonna do my best to split this half and half between the beef and the veal. Now half the stock goes in each. It's supposed to come about halfway up. All right, we're to the last step, which is just simply to stir in the basil, the garlic, the peels, and the tomatoes. Basil, garlic, peel, tomatoes. Okay, cover the casserole and either simmer over low heat on top of the stove or set in the lower middle of a preheated 325-degree oven. Maintain liquid at a slow simmer for about 1.25 hours or until the meat is tender when pierced with a fork. Do not overcook. The meat should not fall from the bone. These have been in the oven for almost 2 hours, actually. They weren't quite tender enough at 1.5 hours, so I let them go for a little bit longer. And now I'm just gonna consult Julia and see what she tells us to do next. When the meat is tender, remove it from the casserole to a side dish. Skim the fat, set the casserole over high heat and boil down the braising liquid rapidly to concentrate its flavor and to thicken it. And we're trying to end up with 2 cups. We taste for seasoning, return the meat to the casserole, and we serve. We're almost there. I think these guys are done. Okay, it's time to put it all together. Looks nice and thick and beautiful. Okay, back in with the meat. A little bit of parsley, just for some nice color. And there we go, 2 versions of Julia Child's OSSOBUCO, one with veal and one with just regular beef shanks. It's finally time to taste, and I have to tell you, it smells absolutely wonderful in here. The sauces look pretty similar, and I think that they're gonna taste pretty similar as well. Meat definitely looks different. The veal is much more tender than the beef shank, which we kind of expected. It's also a lot more pink than the beef shank, which is exactly what we saw when we brought it out of the refrigerator. I'm gonna try to carve a little piece off and taste both of them. Not fall apart, but pretty tender actually. It's much more tender than other beef shanks I've had. Okay, now the veal. Yeah, it's falling apart. Exactly as expected. We're not surprised about that though. The test was not to see which meat worked better in OSSOBUCO because of course the meat it was made for is veal. The test was to see if in a pinch or in a low budget situation or even just in a reasonable budget situation, if beef shank would be a decent substitute for veal in this OSSOBUCO. So let's taste the beef shank first. Earthy, citrusy, pretty tender. It's a delicious dish. Beautiful. Time for the veal. It's a little bit more tender. I can taste the citrus a little bit more in the veal. I'm not sure. I'm not completely sure that it's worth the 2.5 times the price for the veal versus just the regular beef shank. What I can tell you for sure is that the beef shank is a great substitute for veal. Works very well and likely needs a little bit longer cook time, but otherwise it's really, really delicious and I think a pretty decent substitute for the veal shank. So if you can't find veal or are on a more reasonable budget or just are opposed to veal for any reason, beef shank is definitely a great option. Now, the one thing that I think the veal will have over the beef shank is the marrow. So marrow is controversial for some people, maybe because it's inside of the bone itself, but for me, absolutely delicious, probably the best part of this whole meal, and so I'm gonna taste a little bit of both. So, so good. Absolutely delicious. Let's taste the beef shank. This taste testing business is really a rough job, but somebody's got to do it. Really delicious. Both are so good. Another successful day in the kitchen with Julia Child and another beautiful recipe. I am conflicted. The veal flavor is a little bit more delicate. The marrow was a little bit better. The stock is a little bit thicker, but the beef shanks are a perfectly good option. I think the difference is you likely could even cook the beef shank a little bit longer. They're just gonna be a little bit tougher than the veal, but that is just to be expected. I really believe that this OSSOBUCO could be a great weeknight, inexpensive meal if you found some beef shanks. Again, $20 a pound versus $7 a pound. I really think this is a great substitute. And I really love the addition of the citrus. I didn't expect to taste it as much as you do, but in both stocks, the citrus is perfect. And I especially liked it in the veal stock. It's a nice, delicate flavor, which goes perfectly with that little bit more sophisticated veal. All in all, I'm not sad that I made these two different types of OSSOBUCO and that I have leftovers. It's just gonna get better with time in the fridge. And I think serving these over some creamy polenta is in my future. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you liked this video, please give it a like. Let me know in the comments down below if you've made Julia's version of this, if you have a different recipe, if you like veal over beef. I appreciate you spending your time with me. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you here next time.